Well, welcome back to Part 3. Our straight shoot news series, The Awakening, begins in 2023. This is Part 3 of Episode 3. Obama classified documents. Promises made, but can they be kept? By the House of Representatives. So with that, we're going to start this one off. We're going to play some of the Chinese Spies Among Us, Twitter with Matt Taibbi, and the budget, which seems to be a major tool in controlling what's taking place. So before we get to Matt Taibbi telling us what actually went on in Twitter, let's go to Representative Bobbert, who speaks on Swawell, Schiff, and the other people that Kevin McCarthy threw off the committees and will not let him on because of he believes the security risk. And that precedent was set up by Nancy Pelosi when she did that with the January 6th committee. It's not getting even here. These are serious concerns. And Bobbert took a lot of heat for holding Speaker McCarthy's feet to the fire to make sure we got some guarantees. Let's roll that clip.
Three Democrats may finally get the much-deserved boot off some of these top House committees. One of them is Rep. Eric Swawell, who's alleged to have kind of shacked up with suspected Chinese spy named Fang Fang.
It is a story straight out of a spy novel.
Suspected Chinese spy targeted California politicians. And one of her biggest targets was Representative Eric Swawell.
That is espionage gold.
If you got the briefing I got from the FBI, you wouldn't have Swawell on any committee.
Well, I don't have any concern about Mr. Swawell.
This is only about vengeance, and there's no substantive reason, to remove us.
You heard what Speaker McCarthy said, that the FBI briefing, they wouldn't have this guy, Swawell, on any committee. Joining me now is Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Bobbert. Congresswoman, first I want to thank you and the 20 patriots who stood up in the speaker's fight and got some conservative, liberty-oriented concessions for the Congress. That was fantastic. But seriously, yes. Swawell's a disaster. We know about this scandal with Fang Fang. How is this guy still on the Intel Committee getting briefings?
As far as Swawell, I mean, look at last Congress. Congressman Gosar was removed from his committee because he made an anime video. So do I think that Swawell being compromised by a Chinese spy is reason to be removed from the Intel Committee? Heck yes, I do. He's obviously sold out to China. In the House, I just voted to stop selling our strategic oil reserves to China. So did most Democrats. But little Eric took a walk and refused to take the vote. He's compromised and he should be nowhere near top secret classified information.
Congresswoman, Adam Schiff as well. This guy wasted 6 years of our life fantasizing about some Trump pee-pee tape that didn't exist. And now he got busted in the last Twitter Files thing, trying to push another hoax about Russians and release the Devin Nunes memo thing. I mean, isn't this another guy who should just be nowhere near classified information?
Absolutely. They're really showing their colors. They're a bunch of blue anons, conspiracy theorists that have these witch hunts and hoax that they chase after. The Democrats' double standard is out of control. They wanted Trump in jail over classified documents, and with Biden, it's let's wait and see. They attacked Don Jr. and praised the crackhead gun criminal Hunter Biden. And now you can even imagine if it was a Republican caught with a Chinese spy, they would be all over that. But the fake news, they would be running 24/7 if this was a Republican. And instead, they are running from it because it's a Democrat. And most Americans haven't even heard about everything that's going on. And not only has going back to Swawell, has he been a member of the Intel Committee? But he was a subcommittee chair, and in one hand he's holding a gavel, and Dan, in the other hand, he's holding a hammer and sickle.
Yeah, he's Pelosi's buddy right there. Congresswoman Lauren Bobbert, thanks again for everything you guys did up there. You did great. Thanks for your time.
Surveillance and control.
Was that
We're learning of the
Was that put well? Was that put well? That was a great statement. In one hand, he's holding a gavel, and the other hand, he's holding a hammer and sickle of the Communist Chinese Party. You heard Kevin McCarthy say right in there, the briefing he got about Swawell from the FBI, he wouldn't have many committee. I want to know why he's even in Congress and not being investigated by the DOJ and the FBI and being charged with treason, aiding and abetting the enemy, because the evidence is right there. And as watches more unwinds this year, he wouldn't even vote against giving communist China oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's how compromised he is. Imagine even more than what's going to come out. And then we got Adam Schiff. Oh, Schiff, he's been lying through his teeth to Congress, to the people, conducting investigations into things that were just made up, claiming he had undisputed evidence against President Trump. When he asked him for it, he couldn't produce it. Why is he in Congress? Why isn't he being charged? Because as more unfolds, you're going to see these people get a little more nervous. Like I said with Swawell, it's going to happen to Schiff too. There's a lot of connections that we've known about, we've covered on what Swawell's what Shifty's all about. And that's got to come out. These investigative committees should cause a problem. What's going to happen? Who knows? Maybe Hillary will take care of them. After all, like I said, we just heard in one of these segments on the news about how they found some of Clinton's information from her server with Biden. That's going to be an interesting one to follow. But here, let's hear from Matt Taibbi. He pretty much unwinds it really good from Maria. And listen closely.
surveillance and control. We're learning of the many techniques that the Biden administration has been using against the American people in their campaign to suppress truth and amplify lies, especially during and around major elections. Yes, we continue to see that. This week, Twitter CEO Elon Musk released more troubling information about the ways the administration has directed social media to censor American citizens and amplify its version of the Biden laptop and the evidence of influence peddling on it, COVID-19 and its handling of it, and the Russia collusion lie, which the Fed pursued, the FBI pursued, and secured FISA warrants to spy on Trump officials, even as they knew there was absolutely no truth to it. Independent journalist Matt Taibbi joins me now with the very latest batch of troubling files. Matt, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for your work around this all of this time.
Thanks very much for having me, Maria. I appreciate it.
So talk to us about the main revelations from all of these Twitter files. There's been a lot. I want you to suppress it into what's most important for us.
I think the major revelation of the Twitter files so far is that we've discovered an elaborate bureaucracy of what you might call public-private censorship. Basically, companies like Twitter had a system by which they received tens of thousands of requests for action on various accounts, typically through the DHS and the FBI, but these requests were coming from basically every agency in the government. We've seen them from the HHS, from the Treasury, from the DOD, even from the CIA, and they will send basically long lists of accounts in Excel spreadsheet files and ask for action on those accounts. And in many cases, Twitter is complying.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the fact that the FBI had a task force of 80 FBI agents or 80 people at the FBI who were tasked with just dealing with social media, but it was many more than that, right? You're estimating up to 1,000 people throughout government.
Right, because that foreign influence task force only refers to the people in the FBI, DHS, and the Director of National Intelligence Office. But actually, this includes people in a variety of agencies, both federal and state. We've seen requests from basically all 50 states. Most of those go through DHS to Twitter. So I would estimate the personnel somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people. That's just based on what we've seen so far. It may be more than that.
Unbelievable how extensive this is. And the FBI actually paid Twitter, right? What were they paying $3.5 million for?
So that's a really interesting question, Maria. We found one incredible email from former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker. This was reporter Michael Schellenberger who found this. And it's essentially celebrating that the FBI had paid $3.4 million for, quote unquote, processing requests. So in other words, all those requests that were coming through to Twitter, and we see all the email traffic talking about what a burden it was for the company to process all of these requests. That's what the money was for. It was for them to look at all these requests for content moderation and censorship that were coming from all these different agencies.
Unbelievable. And some of the requests were just incredible. I want you to tell us some about those requests, because at some point, some of the, lawmakers like a Dianne Feinstein or an Adam Schiff would say, just shut these people's accounts down, period. The FBI would say, these are the people, these are the accounts that we think are, well, you tell me what they said. They just wanted them shut down. But what are the other requests that the FBI was making? What did they want to know from Twitter?
Yeah, it's funny. As I was reading these tens of thousands of emails, we would put them into different buckets. So this might be a First Amendment particular issue over here. This might be a revolving door question over here. But then over here, we had a bucket called improper asks. And there you might see something like the FBI asking for user identification or IP addresses or handles, and in some cases, even things like geolocation of individual accounts. Now, the problem is we don't always see the other side of these transactions, but we can definitely see the government asking for these things. So these are things that they're not entitled to, usually without a subpoena or without a warrant, but they're asking for them anyway because they have a very close relationship with these companies. And in some cases, we're not talking about a few accounts. We're talking about thousands of accounts where they're asking for handles or IP addresses or other information.
Unbelievable.
And that, I think, is very dangerous. Yeah.
Very dangerous. Of course, this is stunning. This is right out of the communist China playbook. Matt, before you go real quick, what happened when Twitter said, oh, well, we can't identify Russian bots. We can't identify that this was actually Russian disinformation. That's not what we're finding. Then what did they do to pressure Twitter?
The usual means is they would go to their friends in the corporate press, and Twitter would be hammered by mainstream press organizations who would say basically Twitter is not doing enough to combat foreign interference. As you know, because you were reporting on it at the time, Congressman Devin Nunes got an extraordinary amount of abuse because it was claimed that the hashtag release the memo was boosted by Russian bots. But we now know, based on stuff that we've seen internally in these emails, that there were no Russian bots, that Twitter was actually telling senators like Richard Blumenthal, don't do it, you're going to look foolish, and they did it anyway.
And when they didn't get what they wanted, they went to CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post, and they got stories manufactured against Twitter. This is stunning. Matt, we've got to have you back on. There's a debate.
Well, there's a man. There's the man who turned around and he reviewed the evidence. He's seen the evidence. And he's telling you about this public-private censorship, all of all the agencies, all these alphabet agencies, all of them were involved in it. As soon as the government gets involved, they violated all your constitutional rights. What do you say? We still have a constitution if you want to use it. The words of Ron Paul, who tried to warn us over 30 years ago. But in saying that, all these agencies that were involved, even at the federal and state level, you got some cases revolving in my state about how we're just installing tracking apps on your phone when you entered the state. It's in court now, I believe. So with the thousands of people involved, First Amendment and improper use sections he had. Oh, improper ass, excuse me on that one. The government wanted to know people's locations. Sounds like Maria got a bit excited there when she started saying, right out of the communist Chinese playbook. Exactly, that's what it is. It's communist tyranny, like Senator Church in the 1970s tried to bring up. Having that ability, if you cross the line and tyrants take control of the government and these agencies, you've crossed into the abyss. He said we can't do anything about it. But many of us believe we can if you just stand up for this. Now, let's look at another way that they're coming at us. This is going to be more on the budget spending and debt and how all these lies are being made up about how they're going to cut your Social Security, they're going to cut your entitlements, they're going to cut defense. But let's listen to what I think McCarthy has to say on it. Roll this.
There's a debate right now about a bill that's going to come to the floor later on this year about raising the debt ceiling. Should we be raising the debt ceiling?
You have to. Talking about on the day that America can't pay its debt, that has potentially disastrous outcomes. And that means that once American debt goes into default, a lot of people can't own it anymore. And American debt doesn't cross default, but it's cumulative. The T-bill defaults, the next week T-bill defaults, the next week T-bill defaults, pension plans have to sell. It is so potentially dangerous. We shouldn't get anywhere near it.
Once again, I do think it's worth a moment to pause and look, how did we get here? And first of all, Maria, there is no doom right today. The hundreds of billions of dollars the government currently has, we won't hit our debt limit to really this summer. So let's take a moment and realize, why did we get here? I mean, if you look just in the last 4 years that Democrats were in the majority, they increased discretionary spending by 30%. When Republicans were in majority for the 8 years prior, they didn't increase it by $1. So that's $400 billion a year we spend more. In the last 2 years, they have taken us from spending $4 trillion to $7 trillion. They have added $10 trillion in the next 10 years. We are now going to have deficits for $1 trillion a year for as long as the eye can see. So what I really think we would do is treat this like we would treat our own household. If you had a child, you gave them a credit card, and they kept hitting the limit, you wouldn't just keep increasing it. You'd first see, what are you spending your money on? How can we cut items out? Every government has to do this. Every state has to balance their budget, county, city. For the White House to say they won't even look at it, that they can't find 1 penny out of $1 of eliminating waste, I think they're just trying to put us into bankruptcy. What I am saying, and it's my conversation with the president on our first conversation, let's sit down together. Let's look at the places that we can change our behavior. The first thing I would say is, why don't you make the House and the Senate both produce a budget? They don't produce a budget, so you know they're wasting money. Why don't you say the House and Senate both have to do appropriation bills? The Senate didn't even do appropriation bills, and then 2 senators wrote a $1.7 trillion bill right before Christmas that no one could read. Are you going to tell me there's no waste in that?
Yeah.
Why don't we look at This is hardworking taxpayers'
Yeah.
money.
Right, and I
We
understand
can
that.
find and
Yeah.
eliminate those things. That's all we're saying. Let's sit down and change our behavior for the good of America, because what we're going to do is bankrupt this country and bankrupt these entitlements if we don't change our behavior today.
But they're not going to do it. Speaker McCarthy, you know this. We've already seen the arrogance in full scale. Last week, Karine Jean-Pierre said there will be no negotiation. The Congress has to raise the debt ceiling. We will not get anywhere close to this. There will be no negotiation. Now, did you make an agreement with the Freedom Caucus that you would go back to 2022 spending levels? Because I spoke with Congressman Michael Waltz last week, and he said, if you do that, that's going to be a $75 billion cut in defense spending. Are you willing to cut defense spending to meet this and not have any negotiation with the White House as Joe Biden wants?
Well, first, let's just take a pause. If we go back to 22 levels, that was what we were spending just 2-3 weeks ago. That's not cutting defense by $75 billion. Does defense getting more than $800 billion, are there areas that I think they could be more efficient in? Yeah, eliminate all the money spent on wokeism. Eliminate all the money that they're trying to find different fuels and they're worried about the environment to go through. I want our men and women trained to be able to defend themselves, to secure, to have the best weapon systems possible. So yeah, I'm sure they can find some places that they could be more efficient. We have some of the best Navy SEALs, some of the best Rangers. They come to me every single day as they serve in Congress and tell me where that waste is in the Pentagon and others and want to be more efficient. But every single level of government should be doing that. How could we be more efficient? How can we deliver a more effective to the American public? And how can we do it in a more secure way that we don't spend as much? Why would we sit back and be so arrogant to say, no, there's no waste in government? Why wouldn't we look at all the money that poured out during COVID? What money of that has not been spent? Why wouldn't you pull that back in? Why wouldn't you make
But they're not
Congress
going
and
to agree to a
Senate produce
spending
money?
cap. They're not going to agree to a spending cap.
Well, Maria, I don't believe that's the case, because when Donald Trump was president and when Nancy Pelosi was speaker, that's exactly what happened for them to get a debt ceiling lifted last time. They agreed to a spending cap. I believe we can sit down with anybody who wants to work together. I believe this president could be that person. That's the conversation I had with the president. Put America on a trajectory that we save these entitlements instead of put them into a bankruptcy the way they have been spending.
So
make us do a budget. Make us do appropriations out in the public. Just doing that would save tremendous amounts of money.
So just to be clear, you're not going to do anything this week unless you could sit down with Biden to discuss this, because you know that there's more money to move around and the real crisis happens in June. And at that time, you are going to try to stick to 2022 levels by cutting out fringe like the wokeism in defense and perhaps elsewhere.
Yeah, there's plenty of places we can find efficiencies and eliminate waste. The idea that a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill was written by 2 senators who were retiring, where nobody got to debate it, I know we could find a lot of places we can eliminate. The idea that you increase spending just in the last 4 years by 30%, $400 billion a year, that you added $10 trillion just with these Democrats in power. I know when we were in power for those 8 years, the discretionary spending went up 0. So what you find, like every single household, the first thing you need to do is a budget. And then you prioritize where your money should be spent. Defense is a very #1 priority.
Speaker.
Okay. We're going to end on that note, but let's take that apart for you. I explained to you in part 2 why our founders gave the power of the purse to the House of Representatives, which represents a majority of the people in all areas of the country. Now it's time for them to do their job. We started that off with that clip from Jamie Dimon, you know, another billion or millionaire who sits there and he says, it'd be disastrous if we did this. Really? Who would it be disastrous to? Because let's explain why. People like Jamie Dimon, and it's not the GOP and these other people that everyone's being attacked for being attacked. It's the people that are like Jamie Dimon, they're actually profiting heavily off of our national debt and having it go up. If they reeled in spending, people like him would lose a fortune in their investments. That's what he's concerned about. He's not concerned about the country. He's not concerned about if communist China is infiltrating. He's worried about himself, like many of them are. This is where the Democrats actually do have something in common with Republicans when they claim, look at the billionaires, they're raping everybody and doing this, and we're going to. No, this can be done if you listen to what Kevin said. So they haven't done a budget in how long? That's their job. They're supposed to put together a budget, submit a budget where all the spending is going to go. This undiscretionary spending thing has been leading us into a financial disaster. And he's right about bankrupting the country. He said, you don't have to cut what he calls entitlements. And those aren't Social Security. Social Security has been paid into. And there should be plenty of money there if it's not siphoned into other funds. So it's not an entitlement. People paid for that. Let's get that straight. You know, and you got to find out where they all spending it. How much was unaccounted for with the Department of Defense? I believe they announced a few months back there was like $1 trillion unaccounted for, something like that in the Defense Department. What are they funding? Maybe January 6th? Other operations that are taking place across the globe? I don't know, but they sure don't want to tell us. And if they tried to pull back spending like for Corona, you know, green energy, wokeism, they're going to have a fight. These people aren't going to give up that money. But the question is, still comes down to where has that money gone? And if it's not being used, what do they intend to use it for? Is it to help we the people? We the people are the ones paying the taxes on this. We're going to get hit harder and harder. Even in my little community, we got hit with a 70% tax increase. I'm like, what? It's across the board for residential and business and commercial. So we need to know. We got money. Like I said, we still don't know. I told you that before. So what have we got here? Trump had made an agreement with Pelosi when he raised the debt ceiling last time. It shows they can work together. But since Trump's been president, been out of the presidency, they've run wild. And they don't want to tell us where the money went. This is going to get interesting. 2 retired senators put together some omnibus spending bill that no one knows where all the money's going. Retiring senators. So are they setting up future jobs for them like the gentleman who was with the FBI went over to Twitter? He must have got a sweet gig over there and made some serious money. So it's no longer our government working for us. It's got to come back to this. Like Ron Paul at the beginning of our first segment said in the clip. It's still available. You got to teach it. It's up to we the people to enforce it. He always talks about peace and how you have to do everything in a nice, peaceful way. But sooner or later, you got to read this document closely and go back to what we told you show after show with the checks and balances. Government's supposed to take care of this stuff. It's checks and balances. When nobody does any checks and balances, becomes corrupt, they put the hands and the power of the people in the U.S. Bill of Rights. With that, I'm going to say we had so much more to bring to you, follow-ups from last week of Brazil and different things like that, but we don't have time for it tonight. Maybe we'll try to get into a future show and probably more on wine there. A lot going on. Active news cycle. Try to look deeper into what you're hearing on television from many of the newscasters. There's so many clips from like like MSNBC, CNN, and they're just totally bouncing off the walls. I mean, it's not even real. If you see Fox a lot, it's because at least they're trying to give you some kind of reality, and they don't even hit it totally. But with that being said, we hope we are leading you to your awakening. See you next week.